Good evening. We begin with the news of one of the biggest economic packages in modern history is now headed to President Biden's desk after it cleared its last hurdle on Capitol Hill.
On this vote, the yeas are 220, the nays are 211. The motion is adopted.
And with that gaveling, the House of Representatives approved President Biden's flagship coronavirus relief plan worth $1.9 trillion. The Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, underscored its significance.
This legislation is one of the most transformative and historic bills any of us will ever have the opportunity to support. It's one of the most transformative that I have seen in my over 30 years in the Congress. It is as consequential as the Affordable Care Act, which expanded health care to more than 20 million people and made benefits much better for over 150 million families.
John Harwood's with us, our White House correspondent. So, John, the bill is now going to the president's desk where he will sign it. And, you know, all in all, it came out relatively unscathed, yes? They lost the minimum wage and they had to reduce the amount of unemployment paid by $100 a week, and there were other bits and bobs. But by and large, it came out unscathed.
Richard, it's astonishing how close to President Biden's initial proposal has just passed this Congress, despite the fact the Democrats only have very narrow majorities in the House, where they could only have lost 4 votes. They lost 1. In the Senate, where they couldn't lose any votes, and they didn't lose any in passing it. So this is quite a testament both to the moment that America is in this pandemic, the desire to get past it, and also to the unity of the Democratic Party around this common purpose with President Biden.
Except, all right, of course, there is always a fly in the ointment, except, John, not one Republican went for it. And that does not bode well. I mean, you know, we know this was popular in the country, and yet Republicans were determined they were not going to pass this regardless.
Well, it doesn't bode well for the prospects of Republicans joining with President Biden and Democrats on major legislation. It does bode well for the prospect of Democrats acting on their own. And the real question is going to be, coming out of this experience, do Democrats decide to rally around the idea of curbing, altering, eliminating the Senate filibuster, which has blocked so many pieces of legislation? Just yesterday, for example, the House passed a pro-union piece of legislation to assist union organizing, certain to die in the Senate unless they get rid of the filibuster. The same is true of voting rights. Republican legislators around the country are trying to curb the right to vote after an election, 7th in the last 8, when the Democratic presidential nominee drew more votes. But there is legislation to safeguard voting registration and voting procedures that can only pass, again, if the Democrats unite, do it on their own. And that's the real drama that comes out of this COVID package is, are Democrats going to be willing to take big, bold steps by acting on their own, or are they going to have a series of proposals that are much diluted from what their aspirations are to try to get some Republican cooperation, and even that cooperation is not assured?
And as they say in that time-honoured fashion, only time will tell. John Howard, we will watch that in the days, weeks and months ahead. Thank you, sir. The markets, they certainly like what they're seeing. No worry about inflation and the stimulus and what it might do here, there and everywhere. It was laid to rest, at least for now. Latest US consumer price numbers showed prices rose 0.4% in February and 1.7% year on year, in line with expectations. Paul LaMonica is there. The US does its monthly numbers on a month-by-month differential basis as opposed to, but then it sort of annualizes them out. The way, there's no inflation. There's no inflation.
Well, not no inflation, but very little. I mean, the annualized number only showed a gain of 1.7% versus, over the past 12 months, which is within the Fed's comfort zone. They obviously only really start to worry if that number starts going north of 2%. So I think right now, and the emphasis is on right now, as in based on what we saw with these February numbers, there really isn't that much of an inflation threat just yet. But as you've already pointed out, Richard, 1.9 trillion in stimulus is coming. President Biden is going to sign that bill. It's going to go into law. People are going to start getting checks. Will that, with the other stimulus that came late last year, finally start to create more wage pressure, more pressure on prices going up? And then that's something that the market might have to worry about again. Obviously, bond yields had been spiking. They've pulled back, and that is a relief for the market. But if they start creeping higher again, we could have another market tantrum where they start selling off stocks because of inflation worries.
GameStop, it's getting a bit silly now, isn't it? It was halted 7 times today in its trading. And if we look at the graph, it goes down and it went up and it goes down. And that's just the way it's looked today. What happened?
It's hard to really put rhyme or reason to what's going on any given day. I mean, GameStop, so much volatility because you continue to have this battle between investors that like the long-term potential, the possibility of a rebound now that Ryan Cohen, the Chewy co-founder, is taking more control at the company and is going to be helping GameStop come up with a realistic, digital strategy to sell things online. But there are obviously many short sellers who think that this stock price surge, much like the one back in January, is pretty ridiculous, to put it mild.
And the market will have its way. Paula Monica, thank you. Guru, thank you. The United States is planning to buy a further 100 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus vaccine. President Biden is expected to make that announcement any time now. You can see there at the White House. The meeting will be with CEOs of Johnson & Johnson and Merck, who, of course, as you're aware, are the competitors who've turned partners in the effort to speed vaccine production. Meanwhile, the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has warned of this deadly gap in global vaccine distribution. The world, they believe, should focus not on only getting vaccines to countries in need and making sure, though, those vaccines actually leave the airports and reach people. The IFRC urging more funding for comprehensive vaccine distribution. Dr. Gianrico Faraggia is the president and CEO of the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. He joins me now. We'll come to the international situation. First of all, let's just look at the US and the distribution of vaccines. I was with someone last night as they got their vaccine. It's turned into an extremely efficient, well-oiled machine where the only problem now seems to be lack of vaccine.
Well, it is a logistic, impressive organization to be able to do what we really need to do, provide a vaccine to everybody around the world. In the US, as you said, it's become very efficient in the past weeks and will continue to do so as we transition with what you just said, which is we're still now a question of availability, and that will soon change then into the question of dealing with vaccine hesitancy. I will, however, want to point out that the fact that we're talking about this, right, that in 12 months, we now have at least 10 vaccines available across the world, 3 in the United States, really does highlight medical innovation at its finest and really does suggest that we need to continue to invest heavily in biomedical research to make sure whatever the next pandemic is, we are ready for it and that we have the research ready for it.
The haves and the have-nots, as we're familiar with, we really are. I mean, I hear, the United States vaccinated 2.2 million people a day. You've got the EU slowly but surely picking up, although it is very slow. But then you have developing nations getting 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 doses donated either by COVAX or by other organizations. This is not sustainable for a world that's aiming for greater equality.
Without a doubt, we have to do a better job of making sure that the people who most need the vaccine get the vaccine. I would put forward that one way to do so is to continue to increase the supply so we get at a point where as quickly as possible, those who are at most risk from suffering will have the vaccine available. And I'm becoming increasingly confident that we are well on our way there.
Listen to the head of Pfizer, who recounted today how it was when he told Dr. Fauci that the vaccine appeared to work.
Tony is a very measured individual, as we can all see. It was the first time that I saw him so emotional. We ended up the call by saying, Albert, this is a game changer. And then we hanged off, and I felt a joy. I was feeling actually happier about him than happier about me.
Doctor, the Mayo Clinic is one of the world's premier medical and research institutions. What did you think when you heard that the vaccines were coming, they worked, and in a sense that was the start at the end?
I think joy is exactly the right word. It's an emotion that's deep inside you. We were, of course, like everybody else, dealing with an onslaught of patients that we needed to help, and we have been fortunate that we've been able to have what is probably the lowest mortality for patients at Mayo Clinic in the world. But you still have to deal with a lot of suffering. And to hear that you have a vaccine that is not only safe, but it is so effective. And I think we've been lulled by getting used to the numbers, but the effectiveness of this vaccine and the vaccines that followed really did bring joy to myself, bring joy to every frontline provider, and again, highlights how when academia, pharma, governments come together, we can actually do great things. And this has to rank as a medical marvel, the ability to have these vaccines available so quickly.
So the stimulus bill has been passed, and within that there are what are said to be improvements to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, if you like. From your understanding of what's happening, does Obamacare still provide, in your view, this backbone of safety net to ensure, which frankly, to those of us from other parts of the world, it's almost inconceivable just how the US has so many uninsured or people without medical coverage. Are you pleased with what you see in this new bill?
I haven't read the new bill, so I will just say that for Mayo Clinic, we have for many, many years been pushing that what we need to do is find ways to better treat people with complex and serious illness, and that everybody needs to have the opportunity to avail themselves of excellent healthcare. Any bill that allows us to do that would be very welcome.
We'll talk more so as the year moves on, because I'm also fascinated about the developments at the Mayo Clinic, particularly your international affiliates in the UAE and beyond. So we will talk again. So thank you very much.